Hello, and welcome to the final portion of our event or weekend. I hope everyone had a great time. I did. Really enjoyed meeting everyone and what everyone brought to the table. Everyone in this room helped bring something to the table, even if it seems small to you. So today we're going to be remembering the 1,496 passengers lost in the sinking of the Titanic. We chose to be here together on the RMS Queen Mary because the 2024 April dates match those in 1912. So last night, as we know, Titanic sunk on a Sunday. 112 years ago yesterday at 11:40 p.m., Titanic hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic. This morning at 2:20 a.m., she slipped quietly into the sea. 1,496 men, women, and children perished, while 712 watched in horror, grief, and disbelief. We gathered here to remember. We gathered together so that we can keep their memory alive. We gathered together because Titanic called us to do this, I believe. Some of us are drawn to the stories of the passengers, the survivors, and the lost, and some of us are drawn to the beauty of the ship, and some of us are drawn to both. Some of us have felt strange and alone, and perhaps accused of being morbid. Many of us have been asked why we study a ship that went down 112 years ago. I'm going to give everyone here a chance to come forward and tell their personal story and reasons if they wish. I do have a couple stories here that were chosen by Titanic historian George Behe, who authored several Titanic books, and he's also a dear friend of mine who also helped start the book club. And George, if you're watching this, thank you for everything. We wish you were here. So these two stories are a reminder of that terrible night and what one woman and what one man went through in their own words. These letters were published in George's book, On Board RMS Titanic. The letters have been unedited and speak the voices of those on board RMS Titanic. And I would say, if you want just one book that tells her story in the voices of the passengers, this is the one to get. And he also wrote another book about the Carpathia, so it's letters written on the Carpathia, people that received the passengers and have written about it. That's very touching also because you get to see things from their perspective where they, opened up their cabins to strangers and offered their clothes to people that had them. So our first letter was written by Cornelia Andrews to her niece. And I'm going to call Lisa Moody up. And I also, as she's walking up here, thank her. She's been instrumental in helping put this event together. She has listened to all my wants and needs, and with a calm, cool, just amazing human who was able to help with everything that you have, the goodie bags, the name tags, the program. We were a great team. I really appreciate you.
On April 18th, Ms. Andrews wrote the following letter to her niece, Matilda Wyant of Newark, New Jersey. My dear, you've seen everything by this time in the papers, but I want you to have a single word for me about our terrible experience, now, when I have a moment. Oh, my dear, may you never have to pass through such frightful hours. It was 12 midnight when the crash came and we were all in bed. I rushed to my door and saw the ice crystals all over. They having come in through the porthole next to mine, and I knew it was an iceberg. But they told us immediately there was no danger, and of course it never entered our heads for one moment that a magnificent ship like the Titanic could sink. So we foolishly all went to bed without fear. After a while, we heard a commotion in the corridor and went out to inquire. And then they told us to put on the life preservers and come out in 5 minutes. That was every moment that we had to get ready. Gretchen put on stockings and slippers and not a single article of underclothing, but a cloth skirt and waist. And we had very little more, but we put on our fur coats. I did not wait to even put on a hat, but I did rescue 3 hairpins, and we went upstairs. Not even then frightened. we finally got in the fourth boat. There was no panic, but no discipline. We had one sailor, and then any man who could row was allowed to get in, and so a Chinese and an Armenian got in, saying they could row, but they could not. So Gretchen assisted the sailor on one side and 2 or 3 women on the other until her hands were frozen stiff. We pulled away from the ship so that we would not be drawn in with the suction should the ship go down. All of the women and children in the boats, and these ignorant men put on our boats while the splendid Americans stood, were not allowed to come with us. Oh, it would have broken your heart to have seen them standing there so bravely and waving farewell to their wives and daughters. It would have made you proud of your countrymen. There was Mr. Thayer, president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, Mr. John Jacob Astor, having to wave farewell to his beautiful wife, Major Budd, and hundreds of others, who probably knew there was no hope for them. We have never seen them since. We rowed off a ways, and in less than an hour there was a mighty explosion. The boilers had exploded, and the ship was broken right in two. And then, my dear, the screams and the shrieks as 1,000 of the steerage went down. And I suppose the crew and the officers and all the Americans. All my life I will hear those shrieks. We were in the safety of the boat from 12 o'clock until 9 the next morning, and all that saved us was the calmness and the beauty of that night. About dawn, a wind came up, and the great waves commenced to appear, and then we were almost despaired. The one man who could row was almost exhausted, and Gretchen stuck to it until her strength was gone. Then, as it seemed 100 miles away, we saw a ship, the Carpathia, and it commenced to pick up boats as soon as it could. But this was only dawn, and it was not until 9 or 9:30 o'clock that we were pulled up over the sides on a rope ladder. With such sights and sounds. The boat next to us put a lot of their passengers in our lifeboat, and then they picked up 17 out of the water. 2 died almost immediately, and 1 went mad. A little baby floated past us. 2 boats of women and children capsized and were lost. No one could rescue them. And all this, my dear, was most wickedly criminal. We were in a sea of ice, some fields over a mile long, and no one apparently was watching for them. We cannot hear that anyone saw this ice until the collision, and the night was clear and cold. The captain had attended the dinner given for him, and perhaps 1 officer was on board. But we were going too fast to stop suddenly, and there was no one to command the boats. Here on the Carpathia, we see, my dear, such sad things. Nearly every other woman is weeping for her husband or child, and it's all past description. They are kind, so kind. I have had 3 staterooms offered me, but there are others who need them so much more, and so we slept on the floor in the library with 25 or 30 others. Babies crying because both parents were lost, and others because their mothers were gone. And to think it was all so unnecessary. No lifeboats for half the passengers. Every passenger will unite me in this fearful condition of things. Of course, we are so thankful for our escape, but the sorrow everywhere saddens you, so you can think of nothing else. We carried everything we possessed with us, so we hadn't a stitch or anything to crawl into when we get home. And we bought beautiful furs and each 2 or 3 dresses, but we don't think of that. All that amounts to nothing. One lady gave me a handkerchief, and oh, what a joy it was to have one. A man, Mr. Morrow, gave me a toothbrush. He had bought 10 to take to Italy. He has a beautiful villa out of Genoa, and is most charming. Another lady gave me some hairpins, and Gretchen found an old school friend here who has fitted her out with some clothes and a hat. So you can see they are almost kind. I don't believe I can ever write again of these things, and I shall not be a husband for a week or 2. I must buy a few things to wear, haven't even a pair of shoes, and if they had only notified us in time, I could at least have saved a few things to wear. If we had known when the crash came that there was danger, we could have at least dressed properly, but we were not notified until the last moment. The thing for which the line should be censored the most is, of course, that only 1/3 of the passengers had any arrangements made for their safety. Only 22 boats and 60 could not have taken in more than 2/3. Is that not a perfect crime? We did not have enough clothing, but I have to keep warm, for it was so bitterly cold. The icebergs all around made the water and air intensely cold, with the long, long hours of agony, nearly 10 hours in mid-ocean. Women crying all around because they felt so sure that their husbands and brothers would not be saved. One woman had 2 little ones. Her husband and 3 others were not with us, and we have never heard of them. Of course, we are hoping some may be picked up by other steamers, but we cannot tell. I wonder, can you read this? All my glasses are gone. I had 3 pairs, and I cannot see without them. And now, I could not tell you in weeks the sad, sad stories around us. Mrs. Astor is, they say, very calm, but does not leave her stateroom. One of the officers gave his lecture. Goodbye, we hope to land tomorrow.
It really makes you think about what you want to do. And I try to, when I hear these stories, I try to imagine what it would be like to be in their shoes and be, some of these people couldn't even speak the language, and they just lost everything. I wonder, and that's what made me want to learn more and more and more about the stories and survivors, like what did they do? Because wow, if someone could get through that, like I can get through anything, right? So we have a choice. I can ask if someone wants to come and tell their story, or wait until after we do have another letter from a male passenger. Just move on to. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be calling up Steve Oblonsky now. This is another who needs to borrow your glasses. Steve is another amazing human being who really helped with this event. I couldn't have done it without him, and he's just he knows the Queen Mary, he knows the people to talk to, he knew the room. He actually even came on a special trip to check the Wi-Fi for us and see how things would be, so we can have a live stream, and he found a chart of the Mauritania room and took the time to figure out where to put the seats and where we should face everyone, and I'm truly grateful, because that's something I hadn't even thought about. I just was so happy that we had a room. So we call Steve up, and he's going to be reading another story from George's book by William Numbers. So you can read this. Oh, you might not need him? Okay. Okay.
So this is from a second-class passenger. On May 12th of 1912, Mr. Mellors wrote the following letter to Dorothy Ockenden. On May 9th, 1912, Richmond County Country Club, New York. Dear Dorothy, I was so pleased to receive your letter and to find you had not forgotten me. I had intended writing you before, but I was ashamed of my writing. You see, I have no feeling yet from my knuckles to the tips of my fingers, owing to having been frozen in the water. And having heard from you, having heard from you, I have got to write. I can assure you that I felt rather keenly when you left on Thursday evening without saying goodbye. Well, I'm glad to say I am getting along fairly well, considering the experience I had on the Titanic. I did not take any notice of the slight shock caused by the collision. I was asleep at the time it happened. And as I had just turned over and went to sleep again, about 10 minutes later, the young chap who shared my cabin with me came and began to yell out that the ship had struck an iceberg, and he thought we were going down. I really thought he was joking, and I told him so, but was soon convinced of the fact by hearing people running about and shouting on the deck and the engines being stopped. I soon dressed and got up on deck to find crowds up there putting on life belts, and had about 15 minutes hard work tying women's belts on. It was an awful sight to see men's faces when the last boat went off. At this time, it was almost impossible to walk on the deck without you caught hold of something owing to the ship heeling right over. We were trying to fix up a collapsible boat when she gave the first signs of going under. There seemed to be a tremble run through the whole of the ship, and the next thing we heard were loud reports inside, which I think were the watertight doors giving way. And before you could say Jack Robinson, there seemed to be mountains of water rushing through the doors, and I was swept away from where I was right against the collapsible boat. And I simply clung on for all was worth. Whilst I was going on, she was going underwater, and it seemed as if thousands of men were dragging me down under with her. When suddenly, her forward nose, on which I was seen to suddenly rise from underneath the water, and I and a few more that were close by cut the ropes and then held the boat to the falls. There was suddenly an explosion, and I felt myself whizzing through the water at an awful pace, having been blown away by the explosion. When I came to my senses a few minutes later, I looked around and suddenly saw the ship part in the middle, with the stern standing several hundred feet out of the water. At this time, I was trying to swim away from her, but could not get more than a few yards away, and I had as much as I could to hold myself up from being dragged down with her. But the suction was not so great as I imagined it would be. After she had gone, the sight that met one's eye was terrible. There were great masses of wreckage with hundreds of human beings fighting amongst hundreds of dead bodies for their lives. I had been swimming for about 5 minutes when a woman caught hold of my coat collar and tried to keep both of us afloat. I had been holding her up for about, as far as I could tell, about 20 minutes when I noticed my hands began to become as swollen as if I had a pair of miniature boxing gloves on. And I began to lose my grip of the woman who was almost dead, and she must have noticed that fact herself, for she began to struggle like a madman and clutched me around the throat with the strength of a man. It was then I noticed she had no lifebelt on, and I found she was dragging me under the water with her. I had the most awful fight for life underwater, as I shall never forget, but eventually I broke away from her and rose at once to the surface. I was so done up with the want of breath that I thought my lungs were affected through holding my breath so long, but it did not take so long as it does to tell it. I had not been swimming for long when I was caught hold of by the leg and found a seaman holding on to me. I tried to kick him off, but found my legs were becoming numbed, and he held on to me like a leech. I struck at him, but he only laughed and began to try to pull me underwater. I managed to get a hold of him by the hair of his head and pushed his head under the water. He became almost insensible, and I got my feet clear of his hands. And when he came to the surface, he began to try and swim alongside of me, but I managed to keep clear of him. I suddenly heard a most awful sound, like a rattle, and he threw up his arms, and I knew he was dead. I shall not forget it, for I'm sure he went mad. I had been swimming for about an hour altogether when I saw an object a little way off, which turned out to be a collapsible boat with about 20 or 30 people clinging to it. I managed, after a hard struggle, to get on this and found that the sides were broken away and that she was well underwater. After a time, I saw some of the people gradually dropping down dead, one at a time, as we had to push their bodies up to keep the raft afloat. Every now and again, we were all thrown into the water owing to the boat capsizing. And when we climbed back, I noticed that there were less climbed up. We suddenly noticed lights on the horizon, which turned out to be the Carpathia, and and suddenly she turned around and went out of sight, and we thought she had picked up the other boats and missed us. There were then several of our own boats in the distance, and we were calling them for about 2 hours, and they answered us back by flashing a green light and blowing whistles, but would not put back to save us. There was then only 10 or 12 of us left on the raft, alive, and there were 5 or 6 laying dead on the bottom. By this time, I had become exhausted and had to let a man I had been holding up fall to the bottom of the raft, but he was saved. Eventually, we were picked up and taken to the Carpathia, having been in the water for about nearly 6 hours, and only about 10 or 12 of us saved from the 30 or 40 people hanging on the raft. I've since been rather bad through having been frozen from the hips downward, and my hands were the same. So Dorothy, I have told you in a nutshell my experience on the Titanic. I hope you will forgive this writing, as I am almost asleep on the pen. Well, I can scarcely hold it. The doctor thinks I shall get the feeling back in my hands, etc., as time goes on. Will you kindly thank Miss Davy for her letter, and tell her I will write as soon as I can. I am awfully busy writing letters. Well, Dorothy, you are the first to hear my story in England. I hope you are getting along well, and also given up whistling. I must now close, hoping to hear from you by return of mail. With kind regards, I remain yours sincerely, William J. Mellors.
Thank you, Travis, for your classes. You know, they couldn't even have called the Carpathia if the wireless operators hadn't broken the rules and repaired the wireless that was on the ship that had broken, because I heard they had been advised not to, if anything went wrong, to leave it, you know. Back then, the wireless wasn't really used so much for communicating between ships. It was used for people to send messages to their loved ones. And you know, there are so many heroes in the story, and they were able to fix that. And you know, I know they get a lot of flack for, you know, when the California was trying to tell them that they stopped for ice, and I think that they were just so overwhelmed. You know, they're just young kids, you know, with the amount of wireless messages that piled up while they weren't able to use it. So you know how it is. You have this pile of work. If somebody wants to interrupt you, you're like, leave me alone, just let me get my work done. So you know, if you really look at the grand scheme of things, they did something incredibly amazing. They were like the geeks of the day. You know, their day was fixing that, getting that Carpathia, and just a miracle that the Carpathia could rush to them without hitting ice and save those people. There's just so many parts of the Titanic story that's just so beautiful and human, and I think that's what draws me in many people. It's a human story. There's, as Dawn said last night, because the Titanic sank so slowly, that all these stories were created. So I really appreciate you all both reading those. I asked the book club members if anyone wanted to write something, and Emma Treadwell sent this in, a verse in memory of the RMS Titanic. Illumine bright, darkest ocean with the light from many lamps, captivate mellow waves with the brave, mournful weeping of violet. That frozen April evening was lit with more stars than could be counted, white softly glowing and flickering as 1,000 distant candles. Upon an ocean of rich blue satin, beneath this great gathering of stars, sailed the perfectly beautiful Titanic. No fearful tempest would this night remove her from her path. No wave tall and aggressive would lay ruin to her perfectly hewn design. The fine work of the hands of the men, toiling for years survivors throughout day and night. Titanic would be lost only to ice, wretched ice, mimicking those stars so high aloft with its twinkling horrid brilliance. A call and a lonely bell pealing thrice into the depth of the night. Iceberg, right ahead. Man and wife, child, old fellow and intelligent. Would vital youth would find their way toward brightest heaven. Those dear souls always held in time, eternal, remembered and thought of fondly more than 100 years later. That fine lady Titanic lies at rest beneath the waves. Although lost forever to days of sun, she will always in loving memory be. In studied word upon printed page, in photographs of black and white, she never reached the shore of American dreams, but still steams ahead, her whistle loud in our memory, her image vivid in our minds. Now is the time for us to take turns coming up. Oh, now's the time for us to take turns. Does anyone want to come and share? Sorry, I should have put a pause there. Thank you, Emma, for your, does anyone want to come up and say a few words? Here comes Paul. Another instrumental, amazing human that was connected to us to come and be our host yesterday to our event, to bring the equipment so that we could have a speaker and a microphone and just be a wonderful presence and to live stream our event to our members. We have 2,000 members all around the world from over 33 different countries. So, you know, they couldn't be here. A lot of them said, Jill, you need to give us a little more notice so we can plan. So sorry about that, guys, but we can bring this to them. So thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you for putting this on. Jill had asked if I would share any thoughts about the passengers, and I'm not a historian. I know the numbers. We may never know what the numbers really are, so please take all this with a grain of salt. But I recently read The Other Side of the Night by Daniel Allen Butler, and it laid out this scene that was probably the first formal memorial for those lost on Titanic, held 112 years ago today, initiated by Captain Arthur Rostron of the Carpathia. Imagine you're the captain of a ship bound from the States to the Mediterranean. Just as you're ready to get a quiet night's rest, you receive word from your wireless operator. The Titanic needs help. Without question, with full faith in your staff, despite all the chatter of Titanic being unsinkable, you make a full U-turn. Diverting from your charted course, in effect, ruining your passengers' expectations, directing your crew to go in full-on recovery mode. The sheer logistical challenges of preparing your vessel to be a rescue ship, taking on an unknown number of survivors with varying levels of medical needs, feeding, housing, reuniting them. Not to mention directing the efforts of your crew to push this ship harder than it has ever been pushed before. A 4-hour sprint to reach the Titanic. 4 more hours to effectively recover and onboard all the survivors and lifeboats on this day, 112 years ago. After hours and hours of planning, the logistics, the stress of saving over 700 lives. Captain Rostron had the mindfulness, the thoughtfulness to hold a memorial aboard the ship as it carefully navigated its way back to New York. I've read that this was probably the first memorial, and in a room filled with people from different backgrounds, different religions, different cultures, he said that maybe the most poignant moment of the memorial was a moment of silence where these people could all just be silent with their own meditation and prayer. So I ask that we take a moment to do that now. Again, exactly how many lives were lost that morning, we may never know, may never agree on. Approximately 123 first-class passengers, approximately 173 from second class, 537 from third class, 688 crew, approximately 1,500 men, women, and children. As mentioned earlier, from the widest range of backgrounds, cultures, and religions, the whole spectrum from first-class wealthy vacationers lounging on the highest decks to the hardest-working firemen and stokers in the belly of the ship, breaking their backs to make a nickel to keep bread on the table back at home. Approximately 1,500 people with hopes, goals, dreams that this voyage on the Titanic would move them forward in life. But it would ultimately be tragedy. It was asked in our event yesterday, why do you think the world is still so enamored today? And I think it's because we all feel connected. At the core of the sensational stories and so many human elements, there's so many human accounts, and we all see ourselves in it in many ways. Whether we're taking the high road, doing the right thing, staying behind on the ship, seeing our families off, and waiting for God to take us. Whether we're fighting tooth and nail, not giving up, trying to survive, or we're sitting safely in a lifeboat, watching her go down, we see a piece of ourselves in every fiber of the Titanic quilt. We in the Titanic enthusiast community, we think about these people probably every day. And there I see another connection. I see a connection to Captain Arthur Rostron. It seems no matter what we are dealing with in our lives, the stress, medical issues, money, the work hustle, even the mundane day-to-day, we always find ourselves thinking about Titanic, our passengers. To think about the 1,500 people who woke up on April 14th, 1912, unaware that that day would be their last. Today, 112 years after that somber morning, and honestly, every day, I think we remember these survivors. We think about those lost and their families and friends. So along with their memory, let us be sure to carry the always poignant message with us. Carpe diem, seize the day. Don't take any moment for granted. Be present. Tell your family and friends that you love them at every opportunity. And of course, in the words plucked straight from James Cameron's screenplay, make each day count.
So much. Did anyone else have anything more to come up and say? So, now we're gonna move, this portion of our memorial over to people that we knew and cared about. You may or may not know them, but first I'd like to remember our dear friend Joseph Ricker. I met Joseph through Facebook many years ago. He was a very passionate and wonderful, kind human being who cared very much about others and children, especially sick children. He had a dream to create a ship that was not a replica of Titanic, but one that honored her. He was so passionate about this that he even, contacted Harlan and Wolff, and he would have planned events here on the Queen Mary, and he died suddenly last year in a tragic accident. But I'm gonna pass talking about Joseph on to our dear friend Judy, who is one of our special guests, and grateful that she's here. Ellen and Don. Thank you.
So, glad everybody's here today, glad to be a part of this. Yes, Joseph, right here, is standing up in an area of the Queen Mary. We took a picture, or he had a picture taken of it, and here's a concept drawing of the ship that he wanted. And we met Joseph a number of years ago here and at a convention, and he became very close to a few of us. He worked in the oil fields up in South Dakota. He actually wanted me to come and work for him. I'm like, I don't think so. And he was just really funny, really caring. And yeah, of course, his dream was called the Titan. And he brought us, Don Lynch and us and some other folks together here, and he actually presented his vision, and it was going to be like I guess like a hospital ship, you would say, kind of like the Mercy ship that go from port to port, and that's what he wanted to do, and he also had a transport company that he had a truck and a trailer, and he started transporting equipment and stuff back and forth across the United States. And when he told us about it, and I said, well, when you come to San Diego, let us know. And every time he would come out, he'd park his big rig on our property because we had enough room for it. And he'd stay down at one of the hotels. And he had a dog that he took with him. And the last time we saw him, we went and saw Elvis. And we went to dinner, and we had a really, really good time with him. And his son Derek had given a call. I can't remember all the events of the day, but he had been in a motorcycle accident, and we thought that he was just in a coma, and they were just waiting to see what would transpire, and he didn't recover. And we don't know what caused the accident. We don't know if he hit somebody or somebody hit him. We just don't know. He was all alone. I don't know who found him. I don't know any of the details except now that he's gone. And he would have liked to have been here. Sorry. We just cared a lot about him, and we miss him.
My grandmother would have called Joseph a good egg. It's, and he, like Judy said, he would travel around, and he wanted me his Titanic friends. I can't tell you how many pictures I've seen on Facebook. Like, to meet Joseph stuff. He tried to visit me once in Lemons on I-70, and I feel bad. I was doing something else and missed his call, and it's my heart that he didn't get to meet. But I knew he loved me and cared about me when I lived in Texas. I was there in the middle of a hurricane and calling me, begging me, watching the news. Jill, I want you to get out of there. I'm like, I'm dog sitting. I'm like, someone's Jill, out of there, And it didn't stop there, when I moved to Leadville up and, I was having some trouble breathing and my oxygen, Jill, get out of there. He really cared about his sons. And he loved this show. This is where Joseph was going to come should have put that up before the live stream. Thank you.
Dates can be jumbled.
They can be, because that was just a very stressful time and grieving, and I found myself for Joseph going through my Facebook, and the funny, for you're right, he was so funny, he sent us, making us see, doing those voices. Yeah, and then they get hit with the other tragedy, you know, so we're also gonna remember, I feel like he's Titanic's Jack Cousteau, Paul Henry Nargeolet. I didn't know him personally myself. You know, last year Lisa and I watched the Orlando live stream, and we really enjoyed Paul Henry Nargeolet. It was very funny and telling stories, and I wish I had a recording of that, because that would have been the last time we'd seen him. Although we had seen him to do some Zooms, and Ocean Gate actually was in touch with us and would ask us to put some things in the newsletter, so the book club had a little connection with that. So what I did was, I asked some of his close friends if they had a few words to share, and John's going to come up and read these quotes from, we have one from this good friend Rory Golden, and another from David Concan. David really tried to, you know, I don't know if you all recall, but the waiting on the news to find out if this stuff had, you know, imploded or what had happened, and I watched David, and he was just desperate to find and get over there and see if there was wreckage of what happened, so, thank you, Don. Don is our VIP for our event, and, you know, an incredible historian, and thank you for being here.
Save that for my funeral. Thank you very much for asking me to read these. You know, I did actually know both gentlemen, and everything that's been said about Joseph is just spot on. That's exactly how I remember it. And I only knew Paul and Reed pretty much from working on one documentary with them. But, you know, like a photo like this, where you see him smiling, that's how I remember him. He was a very pleasant person, very nice. I didn't get a chance to really sit and talk with him one-on-one ever, but he was an awfully nice guy. It was very obvious. So Rory was written, P.H. Nargeolet was a pioneer in deep water exploration. He epitomized what exploration is all about. Curiously, in a desire to push further and get a better understanding of our oceans. These aren't reading buttons. He took calculated risks all his life. That is the true spirit of an explorer. Not why, but why not? We only knew each other for 3 years, and it felt that we had been friends for all our lives. That is the essence and common bond of explorers, the connection. PH and I connected. I miss him. Rest in peace, PH. And David Concannon wrote, to our friends who have lived with such curiosity and eagerness to know more about the Titanic, the passengers include my appreciation for your friendship and camaraderie. It has been a pleasure to know you and to share time at sea with you. May you enjoy life and the afterlife. And the photo here is from David Gallo. David and
And then I think, thank you, Paul's gonna come up if he's got a few. Thank you, Don.
Jamie and I had the pleasure of, along with Don and Judy, attending the Titanic conference in Las Vegas last August. And that is hosted by a gentleman by the name of Bill Willard, who some of you may know. He knew PH personally and passed this along. These are the thoughts that they included in their memorial last August. Paul Henry Nargeolet, or as he preferred, PH, was part of the first expedition to visit Titanic's wreck in 1987 after the Discovery expeditions in 85 and 86. Through all of his expeditions over the years, PH made a total of 37 dives to Titanic. The first recovery from Titanic was a silver plate from the debris field recovered by PH. Working with George Tulloch, the two recovered over 5,300 artifacts, pages of history from a single event in time. The Titanic had substance and importance to PH, and every artifact he brought up, whether it was small or large, was a special piece of history and important to Titanic's story. He designed several systems for artifact recovery, such as the scoop, which literally scooped up artifacts and a layer of the sand underneath them. The sand would sift out, leaving a gentle settling of the artifact in the apparatus. PH was an advocate for strict conservation and preservation of the artifacts. He was RMSTI's liaison with the first conservation group, LP3, in France. Mr. Titanic, as he was known, PH was also a dynamic leader, a respected teammate whose knowledge of the Titanic wreck was unparalleled. His encouragement and example propelled us to go one step further, to be just a little bit better, and to overcome equipment limitations and the challenges thrown at us by the sea. Volumes have been added to the Titanic story because of the work of P.H. Nargillet. An example of this is the recovered Howard Irwin bag. Many times P.H. could be found sharing his insight of Scotland Road or any place visited by the Robin ROV. In April, at the speaker series of RMSTI in Orlando, he was asked, "What do you want us to recover, PH?" He said almost immediately, "Boiler." PH, we shall miss your smiles, your laughter, your love for all things Titanic, and much, much more. Truly a giant among others, you have provided millions of people around the world with an opportunity to see and experience Titanic through the artifacts. The ship and the story are now tangible to adults and children around the world, and to hear their children and to their children's children. Merci, mon ami. P.H. Nargillet, retired commander in the French Navy, father of 3, grandfather, husband, and dear friend of so many, we shall always remember you.
Just gonna check my phone one more time. David Gallo is gonna bring something up, I know he's busy and get back to me. So we're still thinking about it. He did send me his photograph and, we have a YouTube channel for the book club and we do have an interview with Joseph Ricker. It was January 6th. And, you're welcome to go and watch. And we had a book club memorial for PH with the book club where we actually, before we had a memorial, we didn't know what to do with our stress of wondering what happened, what's going on, and as days went by, you know, we mourned together, we worried together, we hoped together, and when we got the news that we had a memorial for him, because he's just another important part of Titanic's story, you know, bringing things up to us that we can learn more about Titanic. You know, I can't say whether I'm pro or con salvaging, but we do learn a lot. And to see that how beautiful smile. So we're going to conclude today with a moment of silence for those lost, for all those lost, and we will sing together with Paul and Jamie Cargamilla, "Near My God to Thee." I then invite you all to share with each other your contact information if you wish, and know that we will have another event in the future. We're so grateful to all of you who chose to spend your weekend with us, whether live or through Paul's live stream. We are honored. Thank you for coming and your service to each other and the club. I'm very grateful for it, and I'm humbled to know you all. So let's have a moment of silence, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jill.
Talk louder. Everyone who helped put this on today. It was definitely a group effort.
You want to do the group photo where you've got steps?
Oh, we should do that.
That's what you're reading.
Okay.